I rise to speak today about the regrettable state of foreign affairs or external relations and the mismanagement by the present government to the detriment of the country. At the outset, I wish to lay on record and appreciate the role and the significant foreign policy achievements of our late colleague, the Honorable Mangala Samaravira, who sadly and prematurely is not with us. Mangala Samaravira connected Sri Lanka to the world, to the international community. Mangala strengthened our relations with India, which had deteriorated, rebalanced our relationship with key friends and the markets where we export to. And he pursued a policy of friendship with all and enmity to none. It was Mangala who convinced the world how serious Sri Lanka was after the war on having a new approach. Mr. Chairman, as you may be aware, the international community of nations is increasingly developing a rules-based approach to common and even competing interests that bind us together in our common humanity and common search for peace and prosperity. It is towards this end that the United Nations, the international bodies, the intergovernmental organizations strive to achieve, and Sri Lanka must have a robust engagement with the world. We must honor our commitments on international treaties and obligations rather than ignoring them. Sri Lanka achieved a significant milestone 12 years ago in ending the war. Our foreign policy, like everything else post-war, needed to change as we moved from an era of war to an era where there is no war. Our interests are also changing to economic diplomacy and the needs of post-war reconciliation. Regretfully, in the past 2 years, we have not engaged with the international community in a very wise and rational manner. And I have my reasons for saying so, which others can contest. The government has sought to treat the international community the way it sometimes treats its domestic constituency. But the international community does not buy or believe the evening telecasts of the government's public and private TV channels and propaganda organizations. They go by facts, by figures, by ground realities, which is removed from myths that are propagated by government. This government's consistent violation of democratic norms and personal liberties, human rights and media freedom, together with regular hunts of those who criticize the government in violation not only of democratic norms but also our constitutional rights and freedoms, cheapen us in the eyes of the world. Sri Lanka has a proud democratic history. First woman Prime Minister, one of the first countries in the world for universal adult franchise where women voted. We have had peaceful transfer of political power, a robust press and the rule of law. This is not a tradition which anyone with a transient mandate can be allowed to destroy, not even with the 20th Amendment. This has weakened democracy, removes accountability, and goes a long way towards making Sri Lanka a one-man show. I must re-emphasize at this time that it was unfortunate that at a time of global pandemic, Sri Lanka became best known internationally for insisting on the cremation of victims of bodies against the religious beliefs, practices, and wishes of some communities to the extent that it required international intervention. No scientific basis for decision making. In the limited time I have, I want to raise a few questions very quickly. The Honorable Leader of the Opposition stated a few days ago, we must move away from a near racist approach to national life and policies and implement a program of national reconciliation. Sri Lankan state must reflect the diversity of our society and also deal with the effects, root causes of our war, political conflicts. Sri Lanka is a divided society. We must seek to heal the wounds and bring about unity. We must build a post-war Sri Lanka that is inclusive, pluralist, non-racist, and accommodative of the diversity of our people. The UN Human Rights Commissioner, the former president of Bachelet, observed in a statement in the UNHCR, which I quote, Regrettably, surveillance, intimidation, and judicial harassment of human rights defenders, journalists, and families of the disappeared has not only continued, but has broadened to a wider spectrum of students, academics, medical professionals, and religious leaders critical of government policies. Several peaceful protests and commemorations have been met with excessive use of force. This must change. The third thing I would bring to your attention is the focus on GSP+. From having this privilege into export markets in the European Union to the US, we need to commit to meeting our international obligations. Concerns related to enforced disappearances, torture, sexual and gender-based violence, extrajudicial killings, detentions, and other accountability-related issues such as immunity raised in these UN resolutions must be paid attention to. We must bring the necessary legal and policy changes that will facilitate honoring these commitments. Fourthly, I would like to bring to your attention the Prevention of Terrorism Act. From its introduction, it was brought in as a temporary measure. Its key issues favor inclusion of administrative detention without trial, non-judicial oversight of detention, and the admissibility of forced and coerced confessions as evidence all make the PTA incompatible with international law and international practices. This we must change. Among other things, in using the PTA, we have seen that the incarceration of the lawyer Hejaz Hizbullah, since declared a prisoner of conscience by Amnesty International, and the poet Ahanaz Jazim. It goes without saying that our colleague, the Honorable Rishad Baduddin, was unjustly held behind in detention for several months. My colleagues will speak at length on the issue of justice and the international ramifications of the Easter bombings, and therefore I will not go there. I also wish to touch on the issues of the Indian Ocean region and the Asia Pacific. Our government speaks excessively of neutrality and non-alignment, but the rhetorical resort to both of these concepts in the absence of any clarity on our national priorities in the region only proves to be counterproductive. In 2015, we positioned ourselves as a hub in the Indian Ocean, connecting East and West as different sub-regions. It was realized that any regional order involving the Indian Ocean should be based on transparent and predictable set of rules which would ensure safe and secure passage to all vessels
you have 2 more minutes.
Going into all these countries. I have issues of concern which I will quickly present here. I am sure you all know, thanks to the series of actions and inactions during the presidency of Mahinda Rajapaksa and the disgraceful conduct of Mr. Jalia Wickremasurya, Sri Lanka was placed in the blacklist by the Financial Action Task Force, FATA. We were also categorized by 2012 as a dangerous country. In 2016 and 17, through the hard work of the Central Bank, the Ministry of Finance, and the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, we were able to manage to get into the grey list and subsequently in 2019 to be removed from the grey list as well. But what did we see on the Foreign Ministry under President Gotabaya Rajapaksa? It was decided to shamelessly petition the US authorities to say that Mr. Jalia Wickremasurya's actions had the cover of diplomatic immunity. When Mr. Wickremasurya appealed to the Supreme Court of Sri Lanka just a couple of weeks ago to have his diplomatic immunity restored and prevented his prosecution on the charges of money laundering and wire fraud in the USA, the Supreme Court a few weeks ago dismissed his appeal. We should not bring our foreign ministry standing to that level by such actions. I would ask to finally, in closing, I would like to ask the officers in the Foreign Service, some of you who may be present in this parliament today, are you representing a country where real democracy, or that one that only calls itself a democracy, a country that protects and promotes human rights and upholds dignity of each and every individual, or a country that only claims to do so, a country that applies equally, the law applies equally
member,
to those,
please wind up.
I will, equally to those in uniform or those in a religious robe, Or is it different to different people? Or does the law apply equally to the soldier and the civilian, or to people who have different political ideology? This is the country that we want to build.
Please wind up.
And finally, I will say, a country that actually upholds the teaching of the Gautama Buddha and all other religious teachers revered in our country, and extends compassion to a mother who lights a lamp for her missing child, or a country that is so insecure that it clamps down on memorialization. Thank you for the time that you gave me.